It gets the job done.
I'm gonna tell you right now, I ain't gonna
I want to thank George Slogan, Mayor Gulfport, former CEO of Hancock Bank, for chairing the commission that I appointed to look at the PERS system. Let me just say to you, I appointed this commission for a couple of very simple reasons. The PERS system is more than $12 billion underfunded. More than $12 billion underfunded, below what is recommended by the governing authorities. That's about $5 billion worse than it was just 10 years ago. We've gone from about $7 billion to more than $12 billion. That's 2.5 years worth of total general fund revenue. If we didn't use any money for anything in state government, it would take us 2.5 years to get PERS to the funding level that is recommended. When I became, 10 years ago, PERS was one of the best funded systems in the United States among state retirement plans. It was funded at 88% of the recommended level. Today it's funded at 62% of the recommended level, despite the fact that we have had repeated increases in the state, the employer, or in actuality the taxpayer contribution to the plan, and the first increase in more than 20 years, in nearly 20 years, of what state employees pay into the plan. An increase, by the way, of about 20% of what state employees pay in. When you consider that the plan's funding level is based on an assumption that the plan is going to earn 8% a year, yet for the last 10 years the plan has averaged earning only 5.4% a year, then I hope you'll understand why it is important that we look at this commission, that this commission look at this system. The legislature chose not to. The PERS board chose not to after I asked them to, and that's why I appointed this commission. Who deserves this the most? The taxpayers deserve it, but the employees and the retirees deserve it the most, because they're the people who are basing their future assumptions that this money is going to be there at a time when the system is going in the wrong direction. So with that, let me introduce Mayor Slogan. When he finishes making his report, I should say to you, the entire report is published online, and somebody who's higher tech than me can tell y'all how to get it off the internet when we finish. But Mayor Slogan.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. If you would like a copy of the full reports, you can go to governorbarbour.com, and its entirety is there for you to study. I think we have an executive summary that may be passed out to the media today. Let me begin by first thanking the governor. He could have gone out of office without calling this commission in. He chose not to do that because he feels that the funding of PERS is a major financial item for this state and needed to be looked at, in hopes that we can protect the sustainability of the system going forward. Also want to thank members of the commission that he appointed and members of the PERS trustees who worked with us. We did some pretty hard work since August, and the copy of the full report, if you go through it, is long, has lots and lots of details. We hired an outside firm to give us some advice. That was done from a federal grant to the federal level. because the federal government has recognized that state retirement programs are subject to some scrutiny, and so they wanted to make sure that we had the funding. So none of this money for the consultants came out of PERS or any tax money from the state. I also want to thank the 4 members of the legislature who served as ad hoc members of the study commission to give us advice and counsel and to give us their viewpoint. It's particularly important that we recognize that going forward, those 4 members, along with other members of the legislature, will be the ones that have to carry the water on what might be done in the future. So we appreciate their leadership. Most of all, we want to thank the general public. We've had thousands, literally thousands of contacts from the general public from all points of view on this subject. We fully recognize the concern that people would have because those that are retired depend on those retirement checks, and we're very, very cognizant of their concern for any changes, and we've been attentive to those concerns, and we hope that the full report will show that the study commission is most interested in protecting the general welfare of the state, including our retirees. We want to call your attention to the fact that the study commission nor the governor has any authority to make any change in the PERS system. None. All of the responsibility for the governance of the PERS program falls on the shoulders of the legislature and to some degree to the PERS trustees for some adjustments that they can make in some of the funding levels. But this report is going to the legislature as a recommendation for them to consider what they might want to do in the future. By way of background, Mississippi, like almost all of the other states, is going through the exact same thing when it comes to retirement programs. There have been a number of states that have already addressed the issue, some in a major way, some in a minor way. But this is not a situation only to the state of Mississippi. It's almost a nationwide situation when it comes to the funding of the state retirement programs. And so you will see, if you go into some work, that states like Rhode Island, and, South Carolina, and Wisconsin, and California, et cetera, are all in the same fix that we're in Mississippi, and some of them have already taken action, some are going to take action the next time their legislature convenes. Mississippi, like these other states, is facing this significant fiscal challenge. It relates to the funding contributions that come from 3 different sources. One, from the employee themselves and what money they put aside for their retirement. Secondly, from the employer, which in this case is the taxpayer. The taxpayer in this case would be state agencies, universities, school districts, cities, counties, and so forth, as well as the investment return that the PERS trustees get from the investments they've made in the past, which is basically the stock market, both stocks and bonds. Taxpayers' cost to PERS has risen sharply in recent years, while the employee contribution up until last year has remained static. All during the 90s and the early part of 2006, for nearly 15 years, the employer tax contribution was at about a 9.75% of payroll. However, the state's contribution has risen 5 times 2006. Its current rate is 12.93% beginning January the 1st, and it's scheduled to go to 14.26% in July. That means the taxpayer's share of the match for the PERS money will increase to almost 46% over the past 8 years. We would submit that needs close scrutiny. The employee contribution, on the other hand, was unchanged at 7.25% from 1991 to 2010. The legislature increased the employee rate just this year, 2011, to 9%. That means every time an employee gets paid, they take 9% of their salary and pay it into PERS. That's a significant amount. And our long report would tell you that we think we would like to get back to a total of about 15%, half and half from the employers and employees, so the employees are not having to put up so much of their current earned money into the retirement program. And we think that's possible, and the report will show that. After much study, we believe the primary cause of the increased cost to PERS is the legislature's decision, which they made several years ago, to increase benefits without paying for the cost of those benefits. And several members of the legislature were loud voices to oppose that. However, it passed, and we think that it needs to be readdressed by the legislature. The unfunded benefit enhancements, which were granted retroactively by the legislature, coupled with the recent stock market downturn, which all of us in this room have experienced, have impacted PERS to what you might describe as a perfect storm, but it's still a storm. Where does that leave us today? Well, we have seen persistent growth of unfunded liabilities despite significant increase in the taxpayer's cost. Over the past decade, the plan's funded status has dropped, as the governor said, from 88% covered in 2001 to now 62.5% in 2011. What does that mean? It means for every dollar that we have promised to pay out, we only have 62.5 cents to make that payment. We've got to get back to a more balanced fund, and we think, and of course all over the nation, it's suggested that you keep that funding source at about 80%. Anything above 80 is good. 62.5% is very, very poor. In fact, it's in the lowest 19 states in the nation. The trends have also caused attention to come to the national credit rating agencies that set the rate of interest that we pay for money we borrow in the state of Mississippi. And those agencies have begun to question Mississippi's growth in total debt load because of the underfunding of PERS. Again, without any changes to PERS, unless the legislature takes some action, we will continue to see significant increases cost to both the employee and to the employer. We're making some major recommendations today. We have studied all facets of the state's retirement program. We're making recommendations regarding the investment in the finance area, management of the program, and the general retirement policy. We have had a special legal subcommittee that has addressed some issues, and we'll give you those in the full report on recommendations that have been made. Let's talk about the specific recommendations that we're making. Number one, it's our recommendation that the PERS trustees should reconsider and lower their investment rate of return assumption from 8% to 7.5%. The 7.5% recommendation, by the way, was recommended by their own actuary, Kavanaugh and McDonald. Over the last 10 years, PERS has achieved a 5.41% investment return, not 8%, 5.41%. Many states have already lowered their investment returns, and a list of those are in the report that we will make. Number two, the legislature and or the PERS board should consider studying the issues of adding a defined contribution component to the state's overall retirement program. The study committee does not recommend a defined contribution plan. We only recommend that the PERS board continue to study having a small component of their program in a defined contribution plan. Number three, the legislature should consider revising the makeup of the PERS board to include more financial subject matter experts and include non-participating taxpayers. In other words, individuals who do not have a financial interest in the PERS program. We think a couple of members in that category who do not have a vested interest in the plan would round out the program and would call attention to some things that have not been called attention to in the past. Number 3, the legal analysts have concluded that new hires are subject to any new standards of retirement. Current employees are subject to changes for future accruals, but no changes to benefits already earned by previous service, and retirees are only subject to changes in the future accruals of the COLA. Number 5, retirement age and tiers for drawing benefits. A little complicated. This will be in the full report, but let's go over those. The legislature, we think, should provide a retirement age of 62 as normal retirement age with the following tiers for drawing retirement. Person should be eligible to draw full retirement at age 62 if they're vested. Or they should be eligible to draw full retirement at age 55 if they have 30 years of service or more, with no cost of living adjustment until they reach age 62. Or should be eligible to draw an actuarial reduced benefit before age 55 after they have completed 30 years of service. Implementing these changes, effective for current members, future services, and all new hires, would decrease the employer contribution rate by 1.61% immediately. It would increase the plan's funded status to 64%, 2% higher than it is now, and it would produce a cost savings to the plan of $93 million. Cost of living adjustments, number 6, and this is the one that folks talk about the most. The COLA is one of the most costly benefit provisions in the entire PERS plan. It accounts for an estimated 25% of the plan's total payout in a single year. The current COLA is 3% simple until age 55, and then the COLA is compounded after age 55. The amount of the COLA due to be paid out next year is $409 million. Again, 25% of the total payout for regular retirement benefits. A statutory fixed cost of living adjustment does not provide a mechanism for ensuring that COLA tracks actual inflation. For example, PERS beneficiaries have received at least a 9% or higher COLA adjustment from 2008, 9, 10, and 11. But during the same period of time, inflation rose by only 4.5% based on the CPI index. The study commission is not recommending elimination of the COLA or any changes to the current option to take a COLA as a lump sum payout. That's an individual choice. The commission recommends freezing the COLA for 3 years and thereafter tying the COLA to a CPI with a cap of 3%. For retirees, COLA payments would continue but just not increase for 3 years. For individuals not yet retired, no COLA would be received for 3 years after their retirement. Implementation of these changes for future accruals for current members and retirees as well as new hires would result in the following. A reduction in employer contribution by 2.12%, an estimated funding status rising to 67% just by that adjustment, and reduction in the first year contributions of $122 million. Other recommendations include lowering the vesting period from 8 to 4 years and continuing the study of the SLRP program, which is the legislature's own retirement program. We make this recommendation since the legislature must address the question of whether it's appropriate to have an additional benefit for members of the legislature and the lieutenant governor. Let me close with this statement. In the short term, PERS can pay its benefits. Let me repeat that. In the short term, PERS can pay its benefits. However, unless the legislature takes action, the long-term sustainability and affordability of PERS is at serious risk. Again, GovernorBarbour.com for the full report, and from the media we didn't address any questions that you might have.
Can you explain what you mean by a portion of a defined contribution plan? What would that involve? Can you explain that a little better?
Well, the defined contribution plan is where your benefit is based on what you contribute. It's not a guaranteed benefit. The plan, the report does not recommend a defined benefit plan, a defined contribution plan, nor does it say that even part of it should be a defined contribution. What it does say is the legislature should continue to look at that without any recommendation beyond they should look at it.
I don't understand what you mean by it should be a part of the plan.
They should look at whether or not part of the retirement plan should be based on defined contribution for future employees. They should look at it, but they don't recommend that the legislature do that.
How would that function next to the defined benefits
Well,
plan?
there are a lot of places that have both.
So retirees would have a choice? Future retirees would have a choice?
Well, the legislature would look at it. There is no proposal here for a defined contribution plan. It is that the legislature should look in the future as to whether that should be part of our retirement plan. Bobby.
So under your proposal, the commission proposal, the 3% freeze would be in effect for not for just during this difficult time, but for intense part.
Yeah,
I mean, when you
let me
first-
make sure
when you first retire-
that everybody who's not in state government every day, like some of y'all, our state employees get an automatic 3% increase in their retirement every year. It's called a cost of living adjustment, but it has nothing to do with the cost of living. I don't know how many of you here are on Social Security, maybe a couple of you. Social Security beneficiaries got no cost of living adjustment for 2 years because the cost of living went down. However, Mississippi State retirees got a 3% increase both years. So there's no cost of living adjustment there. Cost of living went down. Retirees got 6% plus up. And in the last several years, as George said, where the benefit for employees was increased 9%, the cost of living only went up a little over 4%. So it is not a cost of living adjustment, even though that's what it's called. What the commission has proposed is for 3 years, there would be no increase. It would stay static to catch up for the overpayment. And then after 3 years, we would go to a real cost of living adjustment based on the consumer price index, based on something similar to the Social Security is based on. New retirees would not get the cost of living adjustment for 3 years.
Would that be just during this current time, or would that be just?
Well, for new retirees, that would be whenever in the future you retired. For the first 3 years, you wouldn't get the 3%. You would get after that whatever actual COLA there is. And you could choose, as George said, you could choose to take it as a 13th check. You would have that right. That's really immaterial to the state, whether you take it as a 13th check or get it divided up every month. But that we would go to a true cost of living adjustment based on what the cost of living went up. That is the recommendation of the board.
Cap for 3%.
Yeah.
Can I ask one?
Further question?
Can I ask one?
Yes, ma'am. We'll have a town hall meeting here for a second.
Oh, okay, cool. I hear a lot of emphasis put on taxpayers. Are our state employees taxpayers as
Every
well?
single one of them are.
I mean,
I hope every single one of them are. At least pay sales tax.
well, they think that they are, and I think that.
And the taxpayers have to be considered here. I think if you ask your representatives on the PERS board, they will tell you, as the chairman of the PERS board did during the meeting, his job is not to consider the taxpayer side. Said that publicly. His job is not to consider. He doesn't represent the taxpayers. He represents the retirees. We try and represent everybody. We want to make sure your retirement's there for you. Look.
We've heard a lot from different lawmakers, their opinions on any changes. I guess what do you think the political will is at this point? Do you think the legislature?
I hope when people understand that we're more than $12 billion behind where we're supposed to be in assets. That's 2.5 years general fund total revenue. That we pay a 3%, quote, cost of living adjustment, even when the cost of living goes down. Very, 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 very few retirees in Mississippi get that. Very, 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 very few. And finally, that we're going in the wrong direction. In 10 years, we're going from 88% to 62%. And don't forget, that's 62%, assuming we get an 8% per year earnings on the fund, when we're getting 5.4% earnings on the fund. I can tell you, if you multiply the amount in the fund by 5.4% income assumption, we will be far, far less than 62% fully funded. So I think that the public, I think that the employees, I think the retirees ought to be beating on the door over at the legislature saying, we cannot accept this. It's not fair to the younger retirees, much less the current employees, to have a system that we know is in this bad shape. I mean, we know it is in this bad shape. So I hope that there's a will to do it, but whether there is or whether there isn't, at least now we got all the cards on the table face up. And people know what the facts are. Thank y'all. Oh, Emily, I'm sorry.
What are the financial implications of not acting? There was some mention of ratings agencies looking at the state's finances.
Well, some of you may recall that we were hit in a newspaper story that one of the rating agencies was considering lowering our bond rating. If our bond rating gets lower, the interest rates we have to pay get higher. The good news about that is that the rating agency thought the state was responsible for all the payments in the PERS system, when of course that's not the case. Local governments participate. The state is not the sole. Once they learned that, they kind of backed off. The point, though, for you to understand is the economic condition of the retirement fund is part of the calculus for our borrowing money and what it costs us to borrow money. And, you know, we don't want to be going where the Europeans are going. And I will say, in fairness to some people, this is not a partisan issue. The Democratic governor of New York, the Democratic governor of California, the independent governor of Rhode Island, the Democratic governor of Illinois have all been dealing with this year. And to give you a very concerning thing, Illinois raised their state income tax by 2/3. Just take that from Mississippi. Raised state income tax by 2/3, put it all into the state retirement fund. They had to put it all in the state retirement fund. And when you look at us, and we're talking about that we are 2.5 times total income for the general fund below where the Gatsby says we're supposed to be, then we just don't want to get where we have to let that happen. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Oh,